Hello, this is Executive Insight from TelecomTV. My name is Martyn Warwick and I'm talking with Dr. Marcus Weldon, who is the CTO at Alcatel-Lucent and also a member of the very prestigious Bell Labs. Marcus, good to see you. It's been a year or two. They're saying in the industry that we're reaching an inflection point, a turning point at which the balance of power between the smartphone and the tablet is changing. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think we were one of the ones saying it probably the most loudly. I think the smartphone, if you think about it, is a device that really has been used primarily for communications. So voice, text, a little bit of instant messaging of different types, but not much more. A little bit of web browsing so you can get access to just that information about where you want to go, what you want to buy. But it's primarily been a communications with a little bit of web browsing device. The only interesting new application that's appeared on the smartphone is actually audio streaming to the phone, using it sort of as a live MP3 player. But that's the extent of what a smartphone has done to the industry. And we thought that was radical. But with this device, the tablet, we've got a much bigger change ahead of us. If you think about it, and there is survey data that supports this, that users look at this device and think of doing everything on this device. So it's not just a communications device, which it currently isn't, actually. It will be a gaming device. It will be a virtual desktop to a cloud instance. It will be a video streaming consuming device. It will be a communications device, storage device, media device. It'll be everything. It'll be that home control device that was always there, that you'd have a touch screen home control. It'll be everything you dreamed of as a consumption and utilization device, which is a very different reality from the smartphone. And as a result of that change, we're going to have to build networks that have 100-fold the capacity, mobile capacity, of today's networks to recognize and enable the transition from smartphones just as comms devices to tablets as life devices.
Well, given that, what are the implications for Alcatel-Lucent?
Well, profound implications, I think. Building a 100-fold infrastructure, increased infrastructure is of course a massive challenge. It's also one we're happy to take up. Specifics that will happen as a result of this, certainly in the core network, both in the optical domain and the IP routing domain, there's got to be a massive expansion in capacity there because all this traffic is unicast traffic. I think we're leaving the era of multicast broadcast for video consumption. So the gains in advantage you get, where essentially you could send one stream for everyone, will not be the norm anymore. So that means any statistical multiplexing rules that used to apply won't be the same, and essentially you're going to have to massively increase the core to recognize that reality. So in IP routing and optical transport, there's going to be massive increases in the capacity there. Good for the infrastructure vendors. In the fixed access side, I think, again, there's going to be a continued evolution of fixed access bandwidth because the fixed access network is actually going to be the backhaul for a new type of wireless network, a small cell network. So you'll start backhauling these small cells, delivering all that nice new wireless capacity using your fixed access network. So those two come together and connect. And then, of course, now focused on the small cell layer itself, there'll be a massive deployment of infrastructure in these smaller base stations, like these light radio cube type modular base stations that we've been working on, and that in itself will be a growth market. So across this industry segment of telecom, there should be a very significant growth to match this demand that's coming from these tablets.
The whole industry talks about the data explosion. Is it really as uncontrolled as that?
That's a good one. I've never thought of the term explosion in its natural context of being sort of out of control. I think it's obviously controlled by economic reality, meaning the pricing plans put in place by operators obviously control the explosion in some way. If we look at what the native demand would be by users, I think it almost does look explosive. Meaning if you just ask what would they want to do to consume or manage their life on this device and connect to the cloud, because great as this device is, it doesn't have enough storage and processing to do everything, so it needs to connect to the cloud, which means network has to be always on. I think their demand is that number of 100 to 1,000-fold, which is explosive. The economic reality of our industry says I'm not sure we can afford to build that network with the current way the money is flowing.
And the established business models are going to have to change.
Absolutely. I think if you look at how things are today, increasingly the revenue streams that have been funding the network build, which are voice and data, both fixed and mobile variants of those, are attenuating. The only one that's sort of stable is data, but at best it's stable. Mobile data, I should say. Mobile data is a stable revenue, but there are no more subscribers really to capture. The market is already saturating in terms of number of users. The amount each user is paying is stable. You have no ability to generate more revenue in that model. But we need to, at the same time, build a network with 100 times the capacity. So that's the conundrum of our industry. And where is the money going? The money is going to the end device, as subsidies operators are paying, $300, $400, euros, pounds, going to the end device maker. The money is going to the so-called over-the-top players as well. So some money is going there, but they're providing a value. But not enough of that money is at the moment going towards the network operator who has to build the network. So the imbalance in our industry, I think, is that the money is flowing from the end user to the operator, but a large fraction of that is going back to the end device maker, and not enough of the fraction is left for the operator to build the network they need to build to make this whole hand-to-cloud experience work. So we need to come up with the new business models where that gets renormalized a little bit and revenue is shared appropriately between device OS, network, web app. And that's, I think, what has to happen for us to reach the nirvana of explosive growth.
Well, Marcus, with due respect, you would say that, wouldn't you? The point is what you're saying feasible given the current models that are in place today?
It's certainly feasible, and I would certainly agree that our industry is suffering tough times. It's not just to the Alcatel-Lucents, the NSNs, I think Ericsson and the Chinese vendors, Huawei and ZTE. The whole industry is struggling because the infrastructure market is contracting because it's operating under this sort of imbalanced, I think, business model. It's certainly feasible that we all emerge from this in a healthy, happy place if we can actually get the money flowing in the right way, because the demand is inherently there. The mobile experience that users value so highly, we heard, we have all these interesting statistics that 66 people in the US sleep with their smartphone.
66%
of people in the US sleep with their smartphone. I normally do a survey when I talk to audiences, and it's about 66% everywhere. In Germany, it was, I think, we have 80% would choose mobile broadband over their partner in their car, which is amazing. And in the UK, I think there's 67% said they would choose mobile broadband over anything. You know, so it's their number one. So we're in an industry where there's tremendous value ascribed to the experience that we're helping deliver. What's broken is where the money is flowing, and so we need to fix that. And yes, you're right, I would say what I'm saying, but if you look at the financials of the companies involved, you have highly profitable, valued web companies, highly profitable, valued device companies, and highly undervalued, you say, or low-valued infrastructure companies. And yet when you connect the hand to the cloud, the infrastructure is an absolutely essential part of that equation.
Let's talk about infrastructure companies for a moment, Marcus. Why is it the likes of NSN, Alcatel-Lucent and so many others are not well regarded these days? Is it because the network itself is being disregarded? It's out of sight and therefore it's out of mind?
I think that has... Well, I think there are two things. I think when the system is under pressure, the pressure has to be applied somewhere and is released elsewhere. And I think the pressure release has been, essentially the device guys have been benefiting, but the pressure then is applied elsewhere, and it's been to the infrastructure piece. And why? Because it was the invisible piece. If you think about it, what does the end user see? They see the web application, it's the thing they're consuming and enjoying. They see their end device, which is the thing they love and touch a lot. They don't see the network. So it's the natural place where the value disappears because it's not visible. In fact, worst case was best summarized by a woman in China. She said to us that she viewed her smartphone as like an extension of her hand, very important, almost like a limb, and the network she viewed like her mother-in-law. And that's generally not viewed as a good analogy. I mean, it's a great analogy in some ways, but it's not actually a positive one. So the point is we're in that space where we're the bad guys who cause things not to work or don't provide enough capacity, rather than the good guys who are visibly doing as much as you possibly can to deliver a unique experience.
Given your plans and what you've been talking about, what about the green and renewable strictures that involve us all these days?
Yeah, it's a great question, of course, because the other part of this equation is if we're going to build a network with 100 times the capacity, we've got to power that network. And currently today, in developed countries, the power budget of running the network is about 7% of the operator's operational budget. So let's take that, and the operational budget, let's say it's half of the operator spend. So call it, therefore, about 7% of what operators spend overall, CapEx and OpEx, is on energy. And we'll just take that number. If we built a network with 100 times the capacity using exactly the same technology, necessarily the energy cost of the network would go up by 100-fold. So clearly, we're at a breaking point where technology has to become increasingly efficient in terms of power consumption in order that we can expand a network by 100-fold without increasing both the environmental impact and actually the economic cost from an operational standpoint. So what that means is things like increasingly efficient processor elements in network elements so they consume the boards and the equipment consume less power. Using optical transport as much as using IP transport, in doing the correct interplay of those two for a highly optimized transport that uses the lowest power cost per bit. Using technologies that allow you to power down elements but quickly power them up when they get used again. So you can think of small cells, take that as an example. If I'm in the city center and I'm deploying these small cells, they're highly utilized throughout the day. But in some city centers, nearly everyone goes home at midnight, sometimes even before. So I could possibly power down those elements, have them consume zero power, and have the macro layer take over, and then power them up again in the morning. And I could save, 20, 30, 40, 50%, whatever it is, power. So it's turning down elements intelligently, bringing them back up when you need them, using renewable local power where you can. Maybe you can solar power some of these smaller elements. Maybe you could use wind power if it were in a rural environment, because these are relatively low power devices of 100 watts or so. So all of these things coming together will actually solve that part of the equation. It's going to be a challenge, don't get me wrong, but I think we have, by innovation in technologies and ways we deploy them and these different powering schemes, I think we can get there.
In addition to being CTO at Alcatel-Lucent, you were also a member of Bell Labs, very, very famous for the inventions that it's made over the years. Is it possible, in your opinion, to actually engineer innovation?
Yes, I think you can. I mean, my favorite quote about innovation is related to predicting the future. The best way to predict the future is to invent the future. And I think that's very much our philosophy, is rather than just me sitting here as a CTO saying this is how the industry should evolve and just hoping it does, our philosophy is actually invent the future in Bell Labs and then commercialize that future, which is what Alcatel-Lucent does as a company. So we continue to invest heavily in Bell Labs, fundamentally believing that innovation is actually at the heart of Alcatel-Lucent. Other companies have different mantras. Ours is that innovation is our choice of weapon in the industry to win with innovation. And then the trick is to innovate at speed, recognizing that the world is no longer a monopolistic world operating in monopolistic timescales where things could come out on years' timescale. But now the goal is to innovate at web speed, but still heavily dependent on sort of infrastructure innovation, which generally has a slower time constant, because to build hardware, deploy hardware in a reliable, robust way in operator networks generally takes longer than deploying an app on the iPad, which I've written on recently, and it only took about 3 months to write and deploy. So I think we're trying to get to web app speed, but operating in the infrastructure domain, and Bell Labs is the engine that allows us to do that.
Marcus Weldon, good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much.